Hello, this is an FRQ video tutorial with several helpful tips and tricks for your APHG exam. What is a free response question or FRQ? FRQs are open response questions that make up the written portion of the APHG exam. There are three types of FRQs on the APHG test, and one of each is on the exam. So there's a no stimulus question, and stimulus just means it's kind of like a resource. So it could be like a picture, a table, a graph, just kind of like a resource. So there's a no stimulus question, so there's no resource. There's a one stimulus question, and that means it only has one. And then there's a two stimulus question. And this right here, this is just kind of a picture of an example of a formatted FRQ. Up to our tips and tricks. So first of all, we're going to want to read the entire question as well as the background info. And that is really important, just so we understand the question and we know what they're asking for. Then we're going to want to fully examine the stimulus and really want to use examples of that in our answers. We're going to want to annotate the question so that way we can understand it. We're going to want to spend about 25 minutes per FRQ. And this is just in the exam, so it just kind of helps you pace yourself. And then you're going to want to order the FRQs by difficulty and go over from easiest to hardest. That way you can knock out the easiest stuff first and get the points on the exam while you leave the hardest stuff for later. Always be specific in your answers. Pay attention to the question word/stem. Focus on specific vocabulary. That way you can really prove to the APHG grader that you know your stuff. Take time to understand the question. This is really important. Fake it if you don't know the answer. Never leave an FRQ blank. And then most of all, just be confident. You can do this. Okay, our first FRQ, no stimulus, so there's no resources on this one. Our background info is English is the most widely used language in the world, thus becoming the world's lingua franca. A. Define the term lingua franca. B. Identify and describe one historical factor that contributed to the worldwide use of English. C. Identify and explain two examples that show how globalization is contributing to English becoming the world's lingua franca. Okay, up first we have A. Define the term lingua franca. So as you can see, I highlighted the question word or what it's asking in yellow. And then I highlight any important terms or just specific things that the question asks for in red. So for this question, they're wanting us to define. So usually that can be a sentence or two. Lingua franca. So a sample answer would be the term lingua franca refers to a common language, usually not native, used to communicate between speakers of different languages as a central means of communication. For example, English is the most predominant lingua franca and is used in foreign diplomacy as well as international business. B. Identify and describe one historical factor that contributed to the worldwide use of English. So up first, as you can see, I highlighted the word identify, and identify just means that they're asking for one quick little sentence. And then we have to describe only one. The graders want to only see one thing that you're describing. So don't give them a list, just describe one. But make sure that you go into detail. Okay. So sample answer would be the English language was historically diffused by colonialism. So we can check off our identify part. Now this is our description. During the 17th to the 20th century, the British colonialized vast areas in the world on all inhabitable continents, so the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Australia. This colonization forced natives to assimilate towards Anglo-European culture and adopt the English language by the institution of governance, educational, and religious institution. Colonization rapidly diffused the English language through relocation, contagious, and hierarchical diffusion, but led to lack of linguistic and cultural diversity. C. Identify and explain two examples that show how globalization is contributing to English becoming the world's lingua franca. So as you can see, we're identifying, so we got one sentence there, and we're explaining. So explain can mean usually 2 to 3 sentences. And we're explaining 2 examples, so the graders want to see 2 examples. So sample answer for this would be, globalization is contributing to English becoming the world's lingua franca because it has diffused Anglo-European linguistic and cultural ideals. For example, the rise of social media and smartphone technology has been diffused hierarchically, starting with those in Western or Anglo-European English-speaking countries and working its way down to LDCs. This has led to higher access and therefore a more linguistic and cultural diffusion coming from Anglo-European countries. Additionally, the spread of fast food chains like McDonald's has spread Anglo-European culture and language by encouraging franchise owners to assimilate to mass-produced Western food and encouraging the use of English to better communicate amongst the company, allowing for more ease in international business. So we just completed our first FRQ, and that was no stimulus. So I know a lot of people, when they see stimulus, they may kind of freak out because you have to include them in your answers. But to be honest, having a resource is actually helpful because it gives you more context on what the questions are asking. So just make sure to look over the questions and the stimulus carefully and use them in your answers. So number 2 says agricultural systems such as the production of coffee are part of a global network. A. Describe a common characteristic shared by the coffee producing countries shown on the map. B. Explain 2 impacts of coffee farming on producing countries. C. Identify and explain one way increased coffee consumption outside of coffee growing areas affects its production. D. Explain one change in the urban landscape in the developed world associated with coffee consumption. So first up we have A. Describe a common characteristic shared by the coffee producing countries shown on the map. So again, I highlighted the question verb in yellow, what it's asking for in red, and in green this time, if it's asking for a specific context from the stimulus, I went ahead and highlighted that green. So a sample answer for this would be, the countries featured on the choropleth all share the characteristic of being near the equator, owing to their warm, humid climate and fertile soil. This climate, high rainfall, and fertile soil allows for easy growth of coffee plants and other luxury commodities. B. Explain 2 impacts of coffee farming on producing countries. Sample answer for this could be, coffee farming can be beneficial for producing countries, providing more jobs and income for generally underdeveloped countries and their populace. This can slowly boost their economy, an export-oriented sector, owing to a rise in secondary and tertiary sector growth due to the development of infrastructure and social systems. This shift of economic activity has helped Brazil develop to become a Stage 3 country. However, coffee-producing countries can also experience commodity dependence due to the vast majority of their exports being only one product. Since the price of commodities fluctuate, they can affect the stability of the producer's economy and affect the rate and distribution of development. This is seen in Uganda, where commodity dependence is high, leading to under and uneven development. So as you see here, I integrated 2 examples for each of the 2 impacts from the stimulus, and that's really what you want to focus on. The more examples that you include from the stimulus, the more the AP grader is going to believe that you understand this content. C. Identify and explain one way increased coffee consumption outside of coffee growing areas affects its production. So sample answer for this could be, increased coffee consumption outside a producing area creates a higher demand for coffee, raising its demand, price, and industrializing coffee production. Higher demand leads to higher prices, increasing profits for producers and encouraging them to invest in agricultural machines and chemicals to increase their yields and production. This develops the growing areas by developing infrastructure and lessening the demand for agricultural workers, forcing many to move to urban areas, developing the economic, demographic, and social statuses of producing countries. For example, the substantial demand for coffee and espresso products has led to the development of Brazilian coffee and agricultural production, owing to its shift to become a Stage 3 in the DTM. So here, we identified one way and explain how increased coffee consumption outside growing areas can affect this production while also tying in that stimulus. So you need to make sure that you answer all parts of the question while also providing those relevant examples. Our last one for this one stimulus FRQ here, we have D. Explain one change in the urban landscape in the developed world associated with coffee consumption. So sample answer for this could be the increased coffee consumption in the developed world has led to increased gentrification. The demand for coffee has led to more coffee shops and cafes catering towards those with money but without kids to support. Additionally, these businesses are often in hip, gentrified areas due to the accessibility to customers and their elite economic statuses. This has led to more uneven development in the developed world, for it has increased de facto economic and racial segregation. And we just have one more FRQ to go, and this is our 2 stimulus FRQ. So as you can see, we have two nice little charts over here that show the different sectors, economic sectors of Guinea-Bissau and Mexico. So our background information for number 3 here is countries are connected hierarchically through global supply chains. A. Explain Wallerstein's world system theory. B. Identify a periphery, semi-periphery, and core country. C. Using graphics, explain which category each country would fit in. D. Based on your analysis from the previous question, how its social, economic, and demographic development vary between Mexico and Guinea-Bissau. First, we have A. Explain Wallerstein's world system theory. Wallerstein's world system theory classifies all the world's countries into 3 categories: periphery, semi-periphery, and core. He suggests that the periphery countries, LDCs, depend on the core countries, NDCs, for luxury goods and services, as well as cash flow in return for their natural resources. Semi-periphery countries, which are generally going to be stage 3 countries, think your BRICS nations, are intermediary countries, often focused on manufacturing in their economies. This classification highlights the interconnection and interdependence between countries for economic growth, taking into consideration developmental disparity because of colonialism. B. Identify a periphery, semi-periphery, and core country. So since all it says is identify, we can just give a quick 1-sentence answer for this. So oftentimes simple is better because it uses less time, and that way it's nice and concise for the reader as well. So sample answer for this would be Uganda is a periphery country, Mexico is a semi-periphery, and Germany is a core country. C. Using the graphics. So it's referring to your graphics here, so we're going to need to incorporate those in our answer. Explain, so it's going to need to be probably 3 sentences, which category each country would fit in. Okay, so looking at the graphs, it looks like Mexico would be classified as a semi-periphery country due to its high rate in manufacturing and secondary sector activity. Mexico is a large manufacturer of many products, including automobiles, for which it gets the material, which is metals and plastics, from periphery countries before exporting the manufactured product to core countries like the U.S. Guinea-Bissau would be considered a periphery country due to its low rate of industrialization and secondary and tertiary activity. While it is increasingly getting more developed, it still depends on its primary sector, mainly for agricultural revenue and its commodity dependence on cashews. D. Based on your analysis from the previous question, so we're going to need to remember what we said for our last question. We're going to want to describe, so about 3 sentences, how would social, economic, and demographic development vary between Mexico and Guinea-Bissau? So we're going to need to make sure that we answer how all 3, the social, economic, and demographic development, would vary between these countries. So sample answer would be Mexico is likely to be more socially, economically, and demographically developed due to its higher rate of industrialization and secondary sector activity. This activity is indicative of high levels of industrialization, urbanization, and better social services, which can include better healthcare, education, which leads to a higher life expectancy and standards of living, likely indicating a stage 3 country. Guinea-Bissau is economically, socially, and demographically underdeveloped due to its overdependence on the primary sector for agricultural exports. It has poor social systems, so poor healthcare, education, and low life expectancy, has little industrialization, and has low levels of urbanization, likely making it a stage 2 country. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in for my APHG tutorial. And just remember to always look at the stimulus and read your background information and questions carefully. And just attempt at everything. You'll do great. Just be confident. Thanks.